The sugya of Chanukah is mainly in Perek Bameh Madlikin. The Mishnah in Bameh Madlikin says which oils and which wicks you're not allowed to use when you bench licht for Shabbos. So the Gemara discusses which wicks and which oils may you use for Chanukah. Then it goes into the whole discussion of all the dinim of Chanukah. Before the Gemara begins the whole discussion, there's a third place. So they discuss which wicks and which oils can you use in the Beis HaMikdash when you're lighting the Menorah. So Rabbi Kiveger asks on the side of that page, what do you mean, which oils? The pasuk says, Shem Zayizach. You don't have a choice. Which wicks? That's what to discuss. The Chumash doesn't say, but which oils to use? Isn't that a Beferish pasuk? So some Gemaras Taka don't have the Girsa Psilas Shmanim. They just have Psilas. Sham Chacham Eim Adlik Mahem. The Shabbos, you're not allowed to use them in the Beis HaMikdash because it has to burn, the menorah has to burn nicely. Others have the Girsa like that. They're lacking the word Shmonim. And there was a balabos in Europe in the early 1900s, I think, who wrote 3 big fat volumes on the Sefer HaMitzvos. The Rav Sadia Gaon didn't write a Sefer HaMitzvos. He wrote a poem, a piyut that they used to recite on Shavuos, where you rattled off all of the 613 mitzvahs. So this Rabbi Yerucham Pella, a balabos in Europe, he was a businessman. So he tried to figure out what exactly is the shita of Rav Sadia Gaon. Which mitzvahs does he count? Which mitzvahs does he not count? So he had to work very hard. First he had to decipher the poem. Which mitzvah is Rav Sadia Gaon talking about in this line, that line? It's not so obvious. And then he had to try to figure out what the klolim were, what the guiding principles were to determine what belongs to the minyan and mitzvahs, what not. So he has a lot of discussions there. So he thinks that the pasuk and chumash Shem Zayizach Kasis Lamar is only a lachatchila mitzvah min hamuvchar. And b'di'evid, if you use peanut oil, if you use some other oil, as long as it burns, b'di'evid you would be yotzei. But I don't know, I think it's usually assumed like Rabbi Kiveger, that the pasuk is me'akev. You don't have a choice. So the Mishnah talks about which wicks and which oils you can use when you bench licht for Shabbos. The Gemara talks about Beis HaMikdash and the Menorah, then the Gemara talks about Chanukah. On Dav Chaf Aleph and Beis, the Gemara begins Chaf Aleph and Aleph, the discussion. Chaf Aleph and Beis, the Gemara quotes Tana Rabbanan. Tana Rabbanan is the way you usually introduce a brisa. So the Tana Rabbanan is a brisa from Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus was written during the period of the Bai Sheni. And it lists off, starting this and Nis, even goes in order of the Jewish calendar, lists off all the Yom Tovim that were introduced by the Chachamim, with the Rabbanan, Bizman Bai Sheni. And they all had to do with the Beis HaMikdash. Why is it called Megillas Tainus? Rashi writes earlier in Masechah Shabbos, this Sefer has a little bit Torah Shebal Peh. It says here and there, every few pages has a halacha. So this was written down. It was a Megillah Biksav at the time that the Mishnayos was still being recited Bal Peh. That's a question. Was Megillas Tainus the first part of Torah Shebal Peh that was written down? Or is the Pirkei de Reb Lezer the first? So the Radal, Rabbi David Luria, usually in the back of every Masechta they have Chidushim from the Radal. When the Vilna Shas was being printed, so the Radal was alive at that time, the late 1800s, so they asked him to contribute if he has any Chidushim. So they have him in the back of the Gemara. But he was the one who put out sort of a scholarly edition of the Pirkei de Reb Lezer. So his hero is Reb Lezer, Pirkei de Reb Lezer. So he wants to push that he thinks Pirkei de Reb Lezer maybe was written down before Megillas Tainus. It does make that much of a difference, but the Gemara quotes the Tana Rabbanan. The Gemara quotes it as a brisa. These Yamim Tovim were instituted mid-Rabbanan. Why is it called Megillas Tainus? Because you're not allowed to fast on all of these Yamim Tovim. Some of them, you're not allowed to deliver hesped either, the lo lemisbed b'hon, the lo lesanoah b'hon. Not to fast, not to deliver hesped. No, these are just lo lemisbed b'hon, but his son is his mutter. So let's off which Yamim Tovim they instituted Midirabbanan. Where did they come up with such an idea? A yontif that you have the Lol Mitzvah, the Lol Sanhedrin, usually called the Tikkun Rabbanan Kein Deraisa Tikkun. They didn't make an Isa Melocha on these Yamim Tovim. That would make life impossible. Every month in Gadonshik. A lot of the Yamim Tovim were like Chanukah is one of them. It's 8 days. A lot of them are more than 1 day. And every other week there's another day that you got to take off from work. So the Jews would never be earning a living. So they never made an Isa Melocha. So what did they pattern these Yamim Tovim after? So it could well be called the Tikkun Rabbanan Kein Deraisa Tikkun. Could be that it was patterned after Rosh Chodesh. In Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, they quote that some understand, the Rambam is not so clear. Some understand that the Rambam meant to say that Rosh Chodesh is a din deraisa, that you're not allowed to stay a hesped, and you're not allowed to fast. So if that's true, others disagree. It's only midirabbanan. But if one should assume that that's a din deraisa, so then you can understand all the Yamim Tovim and Megillas Tanis were patterned after the institution of Rosh Chodesh, that you have an inyan of simcha. Why is it also a hesped b'tainis? Because there's a chiyuv simcha. But on Yamim Tovim, on Pesach Shavuos Sukkos, there's a chiyuv simcha b'kum b'yaseh. You have to eat basa v'yayin. You have to bring korban shalmei simcha on the shoulders regalim. Gimel, there are 3 when the Jews were el regel. They had to bring 3 korbanos: riyah chagiga and simcha, shalmei simcha. Bizman she'en beis hamikdash kayim. So that's a machlokes Taisus and the Rambam, where the simcha bizman says the Raisa the Rabbanan on the Yom Tov. Taisus thinks that the mitzvah of simcha on the shalosh regalim is only fulfilled by eating shalmei simcha, by eating korbanos, b'sar korbanos. And what we do today is all midirabbanan. The Rambam holds not so, that shar midei simchas are also a mitzvah min haTorah. That you have to buy your wife a new dress every yontif. One of the rabbis in the yeshiva used to say, Rashi and Taisus quote in Maseches Megillah from the Pirkei de Reb Lezer that Rosh Chodesh is a yontif for women. What does it mean a yontif for women? Because every yontif the husband is obligated to buy his wife another dress. So the women want to buy a new dress every Rosh Chodesh, and including and of course Shalosh Regalim also Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So that's why it's a yontif for women, because they want to buy another dress. In Shulchan Aruch it says a different reason why. So yontif for women abstain from doing baloch. They don't do stitching. They don't do any typing. Today a lot of women do. The Mishnah Berurah thinks that it's not right. He thinks that it's an old minig from the days of at least from the days of the Tanoim. And he thinks that it's a minig of Kalalis on minig Atzibah, that the women don't do certain kinds, or they don't do the laundry on Rosh Chodesh. They shouldn't do heavy. They can cook. You can cook on Yontav also. Achon Nefesh you can cook. But they shouldn't do malachas kvedas on Rosh Chodesh. So it could well be that called the Tikkun Rabbanan Kein Deraisa Tikkun, that the Isa Hesped V'Tainis on all the Yom Tovim and Megillas Tainis is patterned after Rosh Chodesh when it's really a din deraisa. There was a great Goyen in Europe, it's like a little over 100 years ago, Rabitzala Panaveja. Not to be confused with Rabitzala Peterburger. Rabitzala Peterburger was the Talmud of Rabbi Sosa Alante, who was Mefarseim, the Shita Samusa. He was a great Goyen. He wrote knockout chuvas, very good chuvas. And Rabbi Tzala Panaveja was a big Baal Mechadish. Chaim Soloveitchik he thought he was the greatest Baal Mechadish of the generation. So he has a lot of chidushim, halacha l'maaseh. We don't follow any of them. He was a little too much of a Mechadish. So he has big chidushim. So he has a chidush about delivering a hesped on Chanukah, Purim, from all the Yom Tovim and Megillas Tainis, about 25 or so. Well, the Yom Tovim, the only 2 that remain today, are Chanukah and Purim. It's a whole sugya in Rosh Hashanah. Why? Why did the others fall away? How come Chanukah and Purim are still around? So he had a chiddush that the onen, the relatives who are in a state of aninus, are permitted to deliver a hesped, because an onen is not allowed to do any mitzvahs. Midirabbanan, it's not min haTorah. Midirabbanan is not allowed to do any mitzvahs. So he's not allowed to observe the mitzvah of Simcha on Rosh Chodesh, or not allowed to observe the mitzvah of Simcha on Chanukah and Purim. So therefore, if he's not allowed to do the mitzvah of Simcha, so you can't say he's also bit behesped. So he's permitted to deliver hesped. We don't accept his opinion because we assume that the Isa Hesped not only applies to the one who's delivering the Hesped, applies to the people who are listening to the Hesped. What is going to deliver Hesped if we're going to pull the plug? So no one will hear it. So what is he delivering a Hesped? But that was his opinion. He had a lot of original chidushim, and most of them were not accepted. Is it true what I said, that the Isa Hesped V'tanis Rosh Chodesh is because there's a Chiyuv Simcha? So the Tur in Hilchos Rosh Chodesh quotes from the Gaonim that on Rosh Chodesh there is a Chiyuv Simcha, as it would appear from the Pasuk, V'yam Simchaschem V'mayadechem V'rosh Chadshechem V'skaitem V'chatzotzes Alo Lasechem Al Zivchei Shalnechem. All year long they brought karbanas, but only on these special days, Yam Simchaschem V'mayadechem V'rosh Chadshechem, there was a Chiyuv Simcha. So they would blow chatzotzvus at the time of Hakrovas HaKarbonis. When you learn the Mishnayos and Erchin, it would appear that they didn't blow chatzotzvus on Shabbos. The Sifrei says on the pasuk, Simchaschem Elu Shabbosas. Okay, the Sifrei is written by Tanoim, but the Mishnah doesn't seem to hold like that. The Mishnah does mention that they blew chatzotzvus on Shabbos. What is it? So according to the Mishnah, what does it mean if you have Simchaschem? If it does mean Shabbos, Madechem Rosh Chadshechem, what is Simchaschem? I think the Netziv always has original chidushim. So he thinks Simchaschem means when the Jewish army is victorious in battle. The pasuk says, "Why do you blow chatzotzes?" You will be remembered in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the purpose of Tkiyas Chatzotzes. So that's why the Chachamim composed the Nusach of Yalav V'Yavai for Yom Tov and for Rosh Chodesh. We don't say Yalav V'Yavai on Shabbos. We only say Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh because Yalav V'Yavai is Zechanen Efik Danyen. Yalav V'Yavai is all about Zikaron. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should remember us l'toiva, and that's in connection with Tkiyas Chatzotzes. That was only on Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tovim. Chol Hamoed, it wasn't on Shabbos. So that's why you don't say Chol Hamoed on Shabbos. We don't observe Avelis before Hesia on Shabbos. When Yom Tov comes, it cancels Avelis. Because Yom Tov has a Chiyuv Simcha. Shabbos does not cancel Avelis. So one could have said very obviously, if Shabbos would cancel Avelis, you would never have Shloshim, you'll never have Shiva. Shabbos is always going to interfere in the middle. And you never have Shloshim, you never have Avelis, Yud Beis Chodesh. Shabbos would always cancel it. But that's not the reason why. Tosfos in Moed the Gemara says that the Yom Tov cancels, and the Mishnah says that Yom Tov cancels Avelis. So the Gemara seems to say, Gemara explains, because Yom Tov there's a Chiyuv Simcha, and Avelis is a Chiyuv to be Misabel, and these are Tartar Isasri. So you can't have both together. So how did you decide to prefer the Simchas Yom Tov over the Avelos? So the Gemara says, Osi Esei de Rabim v'dochi Esei de Yochi. Usually we have a rule, Esei docha lois Esei, but there's no rule, Esei docha Esei. The Gemara has on the very last daf in Chulin. The Gemara says, Ein Esei docha Esei, because Ma'ul mehai Esei. How did you decide that this Esei is stronger than the other Esei? An Esei is docha lois Esei, because we assume that an Esei is stronger, more important than a loises. In what way is it more important? That's a question. So the Ramban Chumash and the pasuk Zochas Yom Shabbos Lakatshay in Parshas Yisro, the Ramban explains why. Because the obligation to observe all the mitzvahs 248 mitzvahs stems from Avos Hashem, and to observe all the loises and not to do averes, that stems from Yiras Hashem. So the Ramban thinks that that's why they did is Esed Dechal Loisese, because the essay is only from the Loisese. It's stronger. Why? Because Avos Hashem is more important than Yiras Hashem. That's what the Ramban said. That's why essay is Dechal Loisese. But you can't say Esed Dechal Essay. Why should you think that this essay is stronger than the other? So the Gemara says, but over here there's a reason to declare. Because essay of Simchas Yom Tov is essay de Rabbim. The whole Klal Yisrael has to observe that mitzvah. Essay of Avelus, this family is observing Avelus. Rashi quotes more than that the pasuk in Nabi says, Ebel Yochad Asilach, observe Avelus b'yechidus. But even without the pasuk, Ebel Yochad, it's only that family is observing Avelus. The rest of Klal Yisrael is observing Simchas Yontiv. So that's why we assume Asi Esi Derabim, Yochi Esi Yochid. So that's why. But on Shabbos, they said there is no Chiyuv Simcha. How come we say Yisbuchu b'Malchuscha in the davening? So that's a good kasha, and the Steichemen has pages and pages on it. Maybe we'll get to that some other time. Later today, we'll see. The only thing you have on Shabbos regarding Avelis is Avelis b'Farhesia is not Noig. Why is that? B'Tzina one is Noig Avel. On Yontiv you don't observe Avelis. Yontiv cancels the Shiva, cancels the Shloshim. But you don't observe the Avelis on Yontiv. Shabbos one observes Avelis b'Tzina. So why doesn't, if there's no Chiyuv Simcha on Shabbos, so why doesn't one observe Avelis b'Farhesia also on Shabbos? So that Taisus quotes are Yerushalmi. Rabbi Soloveitchik would always quote this every year when he would talk about whether there's a Chiyuv Simcha on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. He would always talk about this topic. It's a machlokes atanaim, whether Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is Deicha Shiva, Deicha Shloshim. We pass on that it is Deicha, and the reason why Yontiv is Deicha because there's a Chiyuv Simcha. It's a Tartar Sasrei. What's a Tartar Sasrei? Because one in Avel is not allowed to wear shoes, and on Yontiv you have to wear shoes. You have to wear shoes. Let's say a lot of people in America, when they walk into their house, they kick off their shoes and they walk around barefoot. They walk around in their socks. So on Shabbos and Yontiv, you're not allowed to do that. Rabbi Soloveitchik thought if you want to, you may. It's not quite Shabbos. You're supposed to dress up Shabbos formally. So formally, you wear shoes. You know, you're not supposed to be so relaxed to walk around just in socks. But Rabbi Soloveitchik thought that the stira is not so much in the maisim. The stira is in the kim shebelev. The Abelis is supposed to be a kim shebelev, and Simcha is supposed to be a kim shebelev. So the emotion that you have is either Simcha or Abel. You can't have both together. That's why it's a Tartar Sasri. So Taisus quotes the Yerushalmi, who raises the issue, how come on Shabbos, if there's no Chiyuv Simcha, how come one is not permitted to observe Avelis B'Farhesia? The Taisus quotes, Yerushalmi quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, Birchas Hashem hi tashir v'lo Yosef etz evima. On Shabbos is the day of bracha, because it says, Vayvorach Elokim es yom hashvi'i v'yikadosh osai. So because it's a day of bracha, it says, V'lo Yosef etz evima. So you won't have any sadness, you won't have any Avelis B'Farhesia. That's why we don't observe Avelis B'Farhesia on Shabbos. But it's not Deiche, the Shiva or the Shloshim, because there is no Chiyuv Simcha on Shabbos. On Rosh Chodesh, there is a Chiyuv Simcha, but Rosh Chodesh, one does observe Avelis. So the answer is, the Chiyuv Simcha, on Rosh Chodesh, Zol B'Shei V'Al Tasa. You're not permitted to do Hesped V'Tainus. But there's no Chiyuv Simcha B'Kum B'Yaseh. So that's why Rosh Chodesh have this combination. It looks like a Yom Chol, and it has Kedusha. Complicated. The Gemara tells this story that the Yevonim, the Gemara quotes from the Megillas Tainus, Tana Rabbanan. My Chanukah, the Tana Rabbanan, they quote Megillas Tainus, that the Yevonim, Timu Kol Hashmonim in the Beis HaMikdash, they had a lot of containers of oil to use to light the menorah, and the Yevonim were metami all of the oil except for one jug of oil, and the whole story continues. So the Pnei Yeshua, on this Gemara Shabbos, Tafalaf and Beis, asked quotes the famous kasha from earlier Achronim. Pnei Yeshua lived in the 1700s. So he quotes the famous kasha. The din is that Tumah is muta betzibur. If you have to bring karbanis, and lighting the menorah is also considered like a carbon. So if you have Shem and Tahar, you use Shem and Tahar. If the only way to fulfill a mitzvah is by using Shem and Tahar, so that's the din. Tumah is muta betzibur. And it's not a korban yachid. The tzibur is mechuyev. It comes from the matzah shekel money that you pay for the shemen for the menorah. So it's a korban tzibur. So why did you need the whole miracle in the first place? Why did the Baal Shem have to make a miracle over here? It wasn't necessary. So the Pnei Yeshua has his answer. He raises another question. It's very strange. The Gemara quotes a brisa when the Chachamim initially instituted the takon of hadlokas neiros Chanukah, so they instituted it with 3 levels. Ikar adin is ner ishud so every family lights one candle. and Mahadran Madlikin Ne'elach Alechad V'yechad, Mahadran Min and Mahadran do Baisav Ha'ilach. The first night they light one candle, the second night they light two candles, and so on. Where in the world do you find another mitzvah? This is the only mitzvah. Where do you find another mitzvah? Metlachatchila, when they made the takana, they made the takana with 3 levels, with Ikar mitzvah, Mahadran, Mahadran, and Mahadran. Why did they make that? So the Pnei Yeshua thinks that the answer to the is one terrace under both kashas. Mikar Adin, they really didn't need any miracle at all, because the Sifrei says beferish that you can be madlik the menorah with Shem and Tomei. The Tumas, Mutter, and a Korban Tzibur. Adlakas HaMenorah is like a Korban Tzibur. So it was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the miracle because he wanted the Jewish people to fulfill the mitzvah b'hidura, b'shleimusa b'hidura. So since the whole miracle was only in order to fulfill the mitzvah b'shleimusa b'hidura, so that's why the Chachamim introduced Mahadran and Mahadran and Mahadran and Hadlakas Neres Chaim. That's what the Pnei Yeshua answers. Others suggest a different answer to the kasha of the Shem and Tomei. Why couldn't they be madlik the Shem and Tomei? But they don't explain it well. They say, when you have a menorah that's functioning already, then you can be yotze the mitzvah with Shem and Tomei. When you make a new menorah, the Chashmonai made a new menorah, and you're mechan. The din is that in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, it says in the end of Chumash Mos, Moshe Rabbeinu, all the kelim that he made, kol kelim shasa Moshe, mishichasam mikat shasan. He made mishicha b'shem and amishcha to give it the full status of klisharis. Mikan v'elach after the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, avidosam mechan chasam. So when Chashmonai made a new menorah, that's what it says in the Gemara, how to make a new menorah. The old menorah was used for avodah zarah purposes, so you're not allowed to use it anymore for Lashamayim. So they had to make a new menorah, so the first time you're going to do the hadlaka, that's going to be mechanach the menorah. They're not supposed to use Shaman HaMishcha, and Baisheni the Shaman HaMishcha was nignas. The whole Baisheni they didn't have. Yoshio HaMelech lived at the end of the Bais Rishon period. So in Sefer Dirayanim it says that he was Goinez, it's a little unclear why, but he was Goinez, the Orim with the Luchas in the basement. So the whole Baisheni period and the end of the Bais Rishon period, when the Kohen Gadol went in to do the Avodah Lefnai V'Lefnim, he wasn't facing the Aron. There was no Aron. But it's Kitchel Osid and the Makam of where the Aron used to be retains a special Kedusha. He would be Maza the Dam. He's a Midam Apar, Midam Asar is Maza the Dam, as if there were an Aron there. It's like Kitchel Osid That Makam had the status, that's where the Aron is supposed to be. So some Achronim give that answer that Tumah is Muta B'Tzibur only if the menorah is already Nischanech, and you have an obligation to be madlik ner. So here they had to make a new menorah, they had to be mechanech. So the original chinuch can't be betuma. Why not? They don't explain why not. So I think the hezbollah is the following. There's a Mishnah in Tmura. The Mishnah says that the din, it's really a misnomer. It's not precise. But we say that a korban tzibur is dechatuma. The Mishnah quotes Rab Meir, says it doesn't really depend on a korban yochid versus korban tzibur. It depends on a korban shezmana kavua as opposed to a korban she'en zmana kavua. Ruba the ruba of the korbanos yochid are not zmanam kavua. The person was machal Shabbos b'shoigig and he has to bring achatos, so he bring it at the earliest available opportunity. Person pledged to bring a shlamim, to bring an oila. Woman had a baby. The Yoledis has to bring karbanos. No zman, no specific day when she has to bring it. It's not zman kavua. And ruba the ruba of the karbanos sibur or zman kavua. But it's not really 100%. Once in a long while there is a korban sibur that's not zman kavua. Let's say a parham of dovashal sibur, not zman kavua. Tmidim u'masafam is zman kavua. If over yom a bottle korban, if you didn't bring the korban on the right day, you blew it, and you can't make any tashlumim. But and the ruba of the korbanos yochid are not zman kavua. But there's a small minority in each one that is not so. So Rab Meir says in the Mishnah, and there's no machloika. Rab Meir says it doesn't really depend on korban tzibur versus korban yochid. It depends on zman kavua versus not zman kavua. So it makes good sense what these achronim suggested. If you already have a menorah that was already nischanech, in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, they did mishichos mekatshos. They did Mashiach b'Shem and Amishcha. The later generations, Avidosam Mechan Chosim. The first time they light the menorah, that gives the menorah the full status, the full kedusha of the menorah. Then once you have a full-fledged menorah, then there's a chiyuv every single night to light the menorah. So that's manu kavua. But if you don't have a menorah, you made a new menorah, you have to be mechanech it. So when do you be mechanech it? The earliest available opportunity. There isn't yet a chiyuv to be madlik the menorah every day. The first time you'll be madlik the menorah, that'll be mechanech it. And then when it has the full kedusha, then it's a chiyuv to be madlik every night. So that's the hezbollah why. When you mekadesh the menorah, when you mechanech the menorah the first time, hadloka b'shayna, that's not zman kavua. Earliest available opportunities. That's called ein zman kavua. So that's why it's not doiche tuma. It's interesting in the tshuvas of the Shoel HaMeshiv, Shol Natanzon. He has a drush on Chanukah. At the end of all the tshuvas, it's quite a few volumes. Shoel HaMeshiv. You can never find anything in the Shoel HaMeshiv because he didn't print them in order. Doesn't go according to the order of Orach Chaim or Shulchan Aruch. It goes, I don't even know if it goes the chronological order of when he wrote them. He just put his tshuvas together. So you have to be a genius to be able to look at anything in the Shoel HaMeshiv. So he's bothered with Akasha. The Mishnah says in Adius that Yosef ben Yoezer lived in the end of the Baisheni period. He was a Tana. Yosef ben Yoezer, he was one of the Zugas. The Mishnah has in Pirkei Avos the Zugas. So the Gemara says in Chagiga, whenever lists off two names, the first name was the Rosh Sanhedrin, and the second one he represented the majority group, like Hillel v'Shammai. So Hillel was a majority, and Shammai was a minority. So the Mishnah has Hillel v'Shammai. So Hillel was the Rosh Bezin and Rosh Sanhedrin, and Shammai was the assistant, the Av Bezin, the assistant to the Rosh Bezin. So Yosef ben Yoezer was from the Zugas. So he says that Mashke Bei Matbachaya, the Mashkem and the Beis Hamikdash are Tohar. Mashke Beit Matbachaya Dochan, it's Tohar. They spoke Aramaic. It's Tohar. So the Gemara in the end of the first parak from Sochem has the Sugi of Chanina's Gana Kohenim. The Gemara talks a lot about that Mishnah, Mashke Beit Matbachaya. So according to one opinion, it includes Shemen. And according to one opinion of the Gemara, means that it's not Mekabel Tumah at all. There's a beferish pasuk in Chumash called Mashkan Sheishasa B'chol Kli Yitma. Mashkan, a beverage that people can drink. It's right, Achilas Adam. Yitma is Mekabel Tumah. So this Tana says there is no such thing. It's only Midrabanan. Mashkan are only Mekabel Tumah Midrabanan. The Beis Hamikdash that man have a geyser Laflishe Tumah to passel up karbonis unnecessarily. Either pasuk said beferish Mashkan Mekabel Tumah. No. That Tana says Yitma means it's machsha other thing. It's machsha oichel mekabel tumah. In order for food to be mekabel tumah, it says you have to rinse it off with one of the zayin mashkin. The Gemara has the Rashi Tevis Yad Shochadam. There's the Rashi Tevis of the 7 mashkin. You have to rinse it off. We spoke a little bit about it. Because you didn't rinse off the mashkin, it's not mekabel tumah. So the Shoel HaMeshiv is bothered with Akasha. Yosef ben Yoezer is a little after the Tkufas of the Chashmonaim. So how can he say that Mashkin in the Beis Hamikdash, that Shemen is not Mekabel Tumah? So why did the Rebbeinu Shalom make a nes for the Chashmonaim? The Shemen wasn't Tameh. No such thing as Shemen Tameh. So what did he make a nes for? It was unnecessary. So the Shoel HaMeshiv gives an answer. Interesting. That the pasuk says the Chumash, when you have a shada, you have to ask the shada to the Vosal al-Shefer to Shayeh b'yamim ha'heim. So the Gemara has a comment on that, Shayeh b'yamim ha'heim. Of course, but you're going to go to the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe and ask him what the din is. He's not going to answer. You have to go to a living person. Shayeh b'yamim ha'heim. No. So the Gemara says, no, we have a sefer from Rab Chaim Ozer. We have svarim from others who wrote Tshuvas centuries ago. And we have a Talmid Chacham in our generation who's the first one to tell you he's not as great a Talmid Chacham as the others. But still, he thinks that he's right, and he disagrees with the Shagazari, disagrees with the people that came before him. So the din is, if he's entitled to an opinion, not every Talmid Chacham is entitled to an opinion. If he's entitled to an opinion in halacha, then you're obligated to listen to him, even though he tells you explicitly that it's in disagreement with other Talmid Chacham who lived earlier, who were greater than him. The halacha ain't bezin yochel avatal divi bezin l'chavem ken gadol menen b'chacham b'minyan. Later bezin can't repeal a rabbinic enactment unless they're greater than the earlier bezin b'chacham b'minyan. But if you're talking about what's a din deraisa, you don't need gadol b'chacham b'minyan. All the Rishonim say that. People think the Rambam said it. The Rambam said it, Taisa said it, the Rosh said it, all the Rishonim say it. They quote it from the Yerushalmi, beferish like that. That din in bezin Rashoy levatal bezin chaver goes on repealing a rabbinic enactment. A later bezin cannot repeal a rabbinic enactment. But if they're arguing what the din deraisa is, so the Talmid Chacham in every generation is entitled to his opinion. So during the generation of the Hashmonaim, the accepted psak was not like Yosef ben Yoz. The accepted psak was that Shemin and the Beis Hamikdash is mekabel tumah, either min haTorah or Rabbanim. It is mekabel tumah. So because that was the accepted psak, so the Shalom Mesha says HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to make a miracle that the Shemin should burn for 8 days till they'll be able to get Shemin Torah. But if the story of the Hashmonaim would have occurred a few years later, 20, 30 years later, when Yosef ben Yezer was around, the Rebbeinu Shalom would have made a miracle because there was no need for it, because that's what the Shalom Mesha thinks. Because the Shemin and the Beis Hamikdash is not mekabel tumah. That's a chiddush. There's room to dingzach with what the Shalom Mesha said. We know from Gemara Simsachim, the end of the first period, there's a din that things are mekabel tumah, and then the pasuk says if you have a korban that touches a davar tamei, it's puzzle, even if it's not mekabel tumah. It's puzzle. There's a psul tumah, even if the thing that should have been mekabel tumah, even if it's not mekabel tumah. But if again b'chol tamei lo yeyachol, you're not allowed to eat it. There's a psul tumah. So it could be that even if you hold like Yosef ben Yezer, that Shemin in the Beis Hamikdash is not mekabel tumah, it could be, but it become nifsal lahakravah. It become nifsal to use in the menorah. He's making an assumption, not so. The Shalom Mesha makes an assumption that once Yosef ben Yezer says Shemin is not mekabel tumah, it doesn't exist. Shemin Tamid didn't exist in the Beis Hamikdash, and even if it touched even if there were dead bodies there, and dead bodies were metami, or everything in the Beis Hamikdash, all the people, all the things, but the Shemin would be good to use for the menorah. Yeah, the Gemara says that the Hashmonaim, the Gemara Menorah says the Hashmonaim had to make a new menorah because the old menorah was used for avodah zarah purposes. And the Gemara has a historical machlokes, which is a halachic machlokes also. What material did they make the new menorah from? So from the outside it had a lot of wood on it. So it looked like it had wood on the outside. Wood will burn if you have a fire. So they had something on the inside, but they had wood on the outside. And the menorah is basically from wood. And the other Tana disagrees. The menorah is one of the klisharis in the Beis Hamikdash. And the other Tanaim disagree. All klisharis have to be made from metal. And wood would be puzzle. The first Tana holds no. The only thing that's puzzle if it's made from cheres, because that's cheap. Earthenware. But if it's not cheres, it doesn't necessarily have to be mateches. Even if it's wood, it would also be good. So that was the machlokes hatanaim when the Hashmonaim made the new menorah. So the first Tana holds it was made from wood. They had something inside to make sure that it doesn't burn when they light the menorah, when they put the shemen in. And the second Tana says not true. It was made from lead. It was made from metal, and it didn't look nice. So they put some wood on the outside to cover it up. But the basic menorah was really made from metal. So that's a historical machlokes, and it's a halachic machlokes. The Gemara says it depends how the Yadarshan Tzukim, the Yadarshan Klal Prat Klal, the Yadarshan Riba Mir V'Riba. If Yadarshan Klal Prat Klal, anything that's Ke'ein Prat is good. So wood is also good, just like the Chumash says metal is good. Wood is also good. If you make the menorah from gold, then you have to have all the tzitzim, kaftorim, b'prochim, you have to have everything. If you make it from other metals, you don't have to make the kaftorim and the frochim. So the Gemara says it can be made from other metals also. May not be made from kli cheres, and it's machlokes, but it can be made from wood or not. Yeah, why did the Rebbeinu Shalom have a miracle that it should burn for 8 days? So the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam writes, because it took 8 days till they traveled to the location where they would get the olives until they pressed it out until they came back to the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know. In Eretz it takes 8 days to go somewhere. So I thought maybe because we have a car. It took sometime 8 days to go from one place to the other. That's what the Rambam writes. The assumption is HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't make a miracle unnecessarily. So because it took 8 days till they made Shem and Torah and they brought it to the Beis Hamikdash, that's why Rebbeinu Shalom made a miracle. We have a pasuk that appears 3 times in Tanakh. Chok nasan v'lo yavor. Kadosh Baruch Hu made chukei hateva, and He Himself doesn't want to violate the chukei hateva. If it's a big shas hatrak, then he'll feel it. If it's necessary, a big shas hatrak, he'll make a miracle. But he doesn't really appreciate that. There's a medrash on the pasuk in Parshas Bo at the time of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, "V'avarte be'eretz ha'balayla l'zedikesel b'chor be'eretz Mitzrayim." So the Medrash says the Rebbeinu Shalom did makas b'choros. He went down into Mitzrayim. It was a bizoyin for Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the Medrash gives a mashal that a kohen had truma, and his truma somehow was in a container, and it rolled into the cemetery, and there was nobody there to take it out of the cemetery for the kohen. So the kohen went and he was matame himself, keneged adin. He went to the cemetery to matame himself in order to save his truma, that the truma should remain there. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu went into the Tumas Eretz Mitzrayim in order to save the Jewish people. He loves the Jewish people. That's how Rav Soloveitchik interpreted that medrash. He really wouldn't have wanted to make any nisim, but it was necessary. It was a big shas hatrak, they had to make nisim, but the Rebbe himself doesn't like to make. He does all the time nisim nistorim. That's hashgacha pratis, behind the scenes. The Rambam explains in the Menorah Nevuchim what is a nes nister all about. So he says that human beings have b'chira chavshis. That's the only thing that's not fixed in the world. Everything else is fixed. There's teva, but what people are going to decide to do is not. Most of the modern psychologists don't accept b'chira chavshis. Most of them say that when a baby is born, he has the whole computer system set up in his mind, what kind of a girl he's going to marry, what kind of a profession he's going to go into, what kind of a style living is he going to have, everything like that. But we don't believe that. That's apikursi. We believe every person has b'chira chavshis. It's a big problem when you go to a psychologist. You have to go to a religious psychologist because the others are apikursi. They don't believe in b'chira chavshis. So the Rambam explains hashgacha pratis is possible because human decisions are not fixed. The person can always decide to do this way or that way. So the Rambam gives a mashal. A fellow works in a ship, in a company where they manufacture ships. So each one has a different job. So his job is, someone else puts in the screws. His job is to tighten the screws very well so the ship won't fall apart. So the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to punish someone that he should drown in the ocean. So 50 years before, he suspends the b'chira chavshis of one of the fellows who works in the shipyard, and he takes away his b'chira chavshis. There's such a thing as taking away b'chira chavshis. That's the one and only thing that's not set. So there's no teva there. So people can decide to do this way or that way. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspends the b'chira chavshis of the fellow who tightens the screws. So this ship is going to sink in another 50 years. For 49 and a half years it's going to go well, then it's going to sink. And then they sell the ship, and then they use it, fine. And then when it comes, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to want to punish someone in another 50 years. So he's not interested in going on this boat. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu will put the bug in his head. He should decide to sign up to go on a trip on the boat. But a tzaddik also signed up to go on the same boat. So the Rebbeinu Shalom suspends his b'chira chavshis, and he does a stupid thing, He never does stupid things. This time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspended his B'chira Chafshin. So he went outside when it was raining without a raincoat, without a sweater, and he caught a cold. So he was sick in bed. So he had to call up and cancel his trip on the boat. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu rigged that there should be a boat by suspending his B'chira Chafshin. The other one, the Russia signed up because HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspended his B'chira Chafshin. He signed up on the trip. The Tzaddik signed up on his own on the trip. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to cause him to do something to revoke to change his mind. And then the ship was going to sink because HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspended the B'chira Chafshin of the one who was supposed to tighten all the screws. So that's the Rambam says in the Menorah Nevuchim. That's how it's possible to have Hashgacha Pratis, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always pulling the strings from behind the scene. The way he pulls the strings, he does make Nisim bloom, makes Nisim this storm. He suspends people's B'chira Chafshin. That happens all the time. You have B'chira Chafshin. I don't have the ability to murder you. If you don't deserve to die, no one has the ability to kill you. If someone deserves to die, the Rashi and Chumash quotes the Medrash on the pasuk. You should put a sisa makala legagecha sasan daber vesecha ki yipal hanoifel mimenu. What do you mean ki yipal hanoifel mimenu? He didn't fall down yet. You should say ki yipal ish mimenu. Someone will fall down from the top of the roof. Why does it say ki yipal hanoifel? The only one who will fall down is one on whom there's a gemar din min hashamayim that he should die. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu will suspend everyone's B'chira Chafshin in order to bring that about. So that's what we assume. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't like to do nisim to change teva. There was only enough oil to burn one night, and the oil burned for 8 days. So that he didn't want to do that, but he had no choice, because the Rambam says it took 8 days to go get the olives and to squeeze them out and to bring it back to the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says when the Hashmonaim were victorious in battle, Shana Acheres, Kavon Masam Yom Tov Mahalav Haidah. The year after they made it, why they wait till the next year? They didn't know whether there's an observation. They didn't know it's going to be a lasting nitzachon. Maybe it's only temporarily a nitzachon. But after the year was up, they saw the Greeks were no longer there in Eretz Yisrael. That was the end of the Greek government in Eretz Yisrael. And the Hashmonaim made a government, and it was strong. So the Shana Acheres, they saw that was a real yeshuva. A real yeshuva, so they made the yontif. It says, B'halal b'haidah. The halal b'haidah means say halal, and say b'ananisim in Moedim and in Birchas Hamazon, we'll talk about. So what happened to the Hadlakas Neres Chanukah? It doesn't say in the Megillas Tainis when they made the Takana. So one of the Talmidim of the Avnei Nezer died a little over 100 years ago. Avnei Nezer was a Chassidish Rebbe, a Schachter Rebbe, but he was a Goyen Hagan. He was a genius. He was a super genius. All of his tshuvas are all sheer genius. That's why Rab Soloveitchik enjoyed very much the tshuvas of the Avnei Nezer. He used to say over a lot of things in shir. Sometimes he would say b'shem mamre, sometimes he forgot. So he would forget where he saw it. In America, he didn't have an Avnei Nezer, but in Europe, he used to learn the Avnei Nezer a lot. So one of the Talmidim of the Avnei Nezer came up with this suggestion. Rab Soloveitchik used to say that Avnei Nezer said, it's not the Avnei Nezer, one of his Talmidim came up with this idea that maybe the Takana of Hadlakas Neres Chanukah was instituted only after the Churban Abayis. The Nes Chanukah, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, in the first paragraph, the Nes Chanukah occurred a little over 200 years before the Churban Abayis. So for 200 years they were celebrating in commemoration of the Nes Chanukah. What was the purpose of the Nes Chanukah? What did they need the whole Nes for? So that's interesting. The Gemara says in the first parak in Yuma that on the occasion of the Chet HaMeraglim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they came back on Tisha B'Av. They gave a negative report. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided at that time, Atem b'chisam chiyah shel chinam, everybody was crying. There was nothing to cry about. Atem b'chisam chiyah shel chinam, ani yekva lechem b'chila dor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said he's going to cause something to happen on Tisha B'Av that they'll have what to cry about. So in the Chumash it's not that explicit. That expression is in the Gemara. That's not in the Chumash. Atem b'chisam chiyah shel chinam, ani yekva lechem b'chila dor. But if you look in Yecheskel and you look in Tehillim, It says beferish on the occasion of the Chet HaMeraglim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them already that they'll be sent into Golus. They'll go to Eretz Yisrael. They'll build a Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed, and they will be sent into Golus. So then the question is, when they come back from the Golus and they build the second Beis Hamikdash, will that be a lasting Beis Hamikdash, or will that also be doomed to destruction? So that Shlomo HaMelech, when he built the first Beis Hamikdash, composed Shir HaShirim. So he writes in Shir HaShirim, Im Chaimahi Nibna Leha Tiras Kesben Delasi Notzo Lalu Achores. So the Gemara has a comment on that post. Im Chaimahi, if when the Jews will have permission to return after 7 years of Golus Babel, they'll all be Yalu Kachoim. Everybody will return back to Eretz Yisrael. Then the second Beis Hamikdash will be as if it was made from metal, and metal doesn't rot. If you drop a bomb, the World Trade Center can be destroyed, but it doesn't rot. Wooden bungalows, wooden houses rot away. So if Yalu Kachim, if everybody will return back to Eretz Yisrael when they'll have permission to, when the government gave permission, then the second Beis Hamikdash will be everlasting. However, in Delasi, will be a very shvacha aliyah, which it was. A very small percentage of the people came back. Then, then the second Beis Hamikdash will be like a wooden bungalow, luach oris, like it's made from wood. And what way will it be rekev shalot bo? The Gemara's expression in Yuma, the first paragraph. In what way will the second Beis Hamikdash rot away? So the Gemara says it means two things. Number one, the second Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. And number two, rot will set in the Jewish people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu are not going to send any more Nevi'im. The role of a Navi is to give tochacha to the people, to give Musar, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't have to punish them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry at Bnei Yisrael. He said if they're not going to come back, if big masses will not come back after the 7 years of Golus Babel, then he'll be angry at Bnei Yisrael. He won't send any Nevi'im to give tochacha. So that's what happened. There were no more Nevi'im. But Gimel Nevi'im Aloi Moimed Babel, the three Nevi'im Chagas Chaim Malachi were necessary. You can't rebuild a Beis Hamikdash without a Navi. That's a drasha in the Sifrei, on the Pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, L'shichna Sidushu, Uvasa Shama Drosh Al Pi Navi. When you want to build the Beis Hamikdash, you have to have the approval of a Navi. So the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent, he was angry at Bnei Yisrael, wasn't going to send any Nevi'im to give Musa, to give Tochacha, but he had to send Gimel Nevi'im. Each one of the three, Chagas Chaim Malachi, said in Nevuah, that had to do with details of the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Why couldn't he send one, tell all the three things? I don't know. But that's what the Gemara says. He sent three Nevi'im, and each one said b'nevuah detail about building of the Beis Hamikdash. So, and Nevuah Chagai, as well in the others also, it says more than once. It says that there were old timers when they built the second Beis Hamikdash. It was 70 years. There was no Beis Hamikdash. So let's say someone was 10 years old when they first destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Rishon, and then 70 years later he's 80 years old. So he'll probably remember what it looked like. So the Psukim say the old timers looked at the new Beis Hamikdash. They were crying. They were crying out loud. And the Psukim say you couldn't hear, the young people never saw Beis Hamikdash, so they were dancing and singing and rejoicing at Beis Hamikdash, and the old timers were crying so much that they drowned out the singing and the rejoicing of the younger people. How is that possible? There's so many old timers, over 80. I don't know. And there were so few young people. But that's what it says. They drowned out the singing and the rejoicing of the younger people. So the old timers were saying, this is a fake, this is not a real Beis Hamikdash. This is ka'ayin be'eineihem. This is nothing. Why is it nothing? So the Navi Chagai, all three, were encouraging Bnei Yisrael they should build the Beis Hamikdash and move on. So the Navi Chagai says, in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Be'erza boy, build me a Beis Hamikdash, this is my desire. I desire to have a Beis Hamikdash. Be'ikavdo, I will be honored. So the Gemara raises the question, the word Be'ikavdo in Treyosar, in Chagai, is written without a hey at the end. So why do we make it into a Kriya Ksiv? Once just read it the Ikav Eid. Why do you read it the Ikav Da? So the Gemara says no, it's missing a Hey to teach us that there were 5 major things that were missing in the Bayis Sheni. Which are the 5 major things? So the Gemara lists off 5 things that were missing. Then Rabbi Kiveger on the margin, in the first paragraph, Rabbi Kiveger tells you, look on another medrash, it's a different list of things, 5 things. Then you look on the back of the Gemara, you always have the Fei 9. Fei 9 gives you cross references to Yerushalmis and other midrashim. So each medrash has a different list. So there were like 25 things were missing in the Bayis Sheni. And the old timers saw that everything was missing. So they thought that this was a fake, this is not a real Beis HaMikdash. So the Navi Chagai says Benevua, Bayis Sheni lasted over 400 years. According to the Gemara, Bayis Sheni lasted 420 years. According to the Goyish history books, the Bayis Sheni lasted another 165 years longer than the 420 years. It was longer. So it was a long pause between Chagai and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So he says, in the future, HaKadosh Baruch, it looks like nothing. So missing so many major things, it looks like it's a fake. In the future, Inyonei HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Navi Chagai, he's going to make a Nes Nigla, and all the nations of the world will hear about it, and everyone will come to Yerushalayim to see the Beis HaMikdash, place where the Nes occurred. What's the purpose of the Nes? What did they accomplish? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the Nes? To show that there is a Hashuras HaShechina in this Beis HaMikdash, and the third Beis HaMikdash will be a Hemshech of the second. The whole second Beis HaMikdash was a Hachana to the third. The second Beis HaMikdash is not a Hemshech of the first. When the Goyim destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, so the Psuk say, Oru Ad HaYisodva, they destroyed everything. But when they destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash, there were underground tunnels and Kaislam Arabi, there are a lot of things that remained. That's why you can reconstruct from what we have, you construct where the Azor is and so on, where all the places are. So the Navi Chagai prophesies in advance that the Nes, Rashi on Treyosa writes that the Navi was saying B'Nevuah, he was saying about Nes Chanukah. In Erech Marishas HaShamayim Ha'aretz, there's a reference to the Nes Chanukah. Kodesh Baruch was going to make a Nes in the Beis HaMikdash. He didn't say what, so Rashi said that was the Nes of Chanukah, to demonstrate everyone should realize that there is a Hashuras HaShechina. Even though it looked like there wasn't, the whole time there was Hashuras HaShechina, and when the third Beis HaMikdash will be built, that'll be a Behemshech of the second, and then that will be more glorious. God Yakvod HaBayis Hazeh Men Harishon, the Bayis Shlishi. That's how the Zohar interprets it, not Pasuk. The Bayis HaShlishi will outshine the covet of the Bayis Rishon. The second was a Haskalah of the Bayis HaShlishi, and the third Beis HaMikdash will outshine the glory of the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu made. It's interesting. The Gemara says the Gemara quotes the Brisa from the Gilas Tainis that they established Chanukah as a Yantav Lahalal B'Hoidah. We recite Hallel and we say Ala Nisim. On Purim also we say Ala Nisim, but we don't recite Hallel. So the Gemara asks, why is there a discrepancy between Purim and Chanukah? Why shouldn't we say Hallel on Purim? So the Gemara gives 3 suggestions, 3 different differences. So one of the 3 differences is that the Nes Chanukah occurred in Eretz Yisrael, and the Nes Purim occurred in Chutz La'aretz. Einam Hallel al Nes b'Chutz La'aretz. You don't say Hallel on a Nes that occurred in Chutz La'aretz, only on a Nes that occurred in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Why is there a difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz? Gemara doesn't explain why. So the Maharsha on that Gemara gives a suggestion. He thinks that the difference was that the Nes Chanukah was a Nes Nigla, and Chukei HaTeva, a little bit of oil is not supposed to burn for 8 days long. Mashe'enikein, so that was a Nes Nigla. Mashe'enikein Purim was a Nes Nistar. That's why Shem Hashem never appears in the Megillah. Everything is b'seisa. HaKadosh Baruch Hu suspended so many people's b'chira chopshas every step of the way. But there was no Nes Nigla there, so that's what the Mashah suggests. You only recite a Nes, you only recite Hallel on a Yantav, these Gavim Tovim and Megillah Stanis, if it's a Nes Nigla, but just a Nes Nistar, that's Hashgacha Pratis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always has Hashgacha Pratis. So you don't say Hallel on that. That's how the Maharsha suggests in the Chidushei Agodas. The Minchas Chinuch quotes this Maharsha, but he gives a different suggestion. He says that we have halachas where we declare that only the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael constitute Klal Yisrael. The Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz are not considered part of Klal Yisrael. All of us, we have Kedushas Yisrael. Kedushas Yisrael is mechayev us to do mitzvahs. It's how shekadishana b'mitzvah yisav b'tzivanu. Kedushas Yisrael is mechayev b'mitzvahs, but we're not part of Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says all the Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz ki yichidim domo. And the Rambam writes in one place in the Sefer Mitzvahs, when he writes the mitzvah Kvias Haluach, the Rambam holds that it's one mitzvah that Bezin should be kaveh Rosh Chodashim and Shemitah v'Yovel. So he says he thinks that that it's one mitzvah Kvias Haluach. One mitzvah Kvias Haluach that you should decide when Rosh Chodesh is and whether the Chodesh is going to be Moleh or Chaser, and whether any given year is going to be Moleh or Chaser, Ibra Hashanah. The Rambam counts it as one mitzvah. The Ramban disagrees, but he thinks you should count it as two separate mitzvahs. One mitzvah that Bezin has to declare when Rosh Chodesh is, whether the month that just ended is a Chodesh Moleh or Chodesh Chaser, 29 days or 30 days. And a separate mitzvah is to decide whether any given year has 12 months or 13 months. The Rambam counts it as one mitzvah. So in that mitzvah, the Rambam has the mitzvah Kviyas Haluach and the Sefer Mitzvahs. So he writes the Kviyas Haluach has to be done in Eretz Yisrael. That's a Gemara, the first parak in Sanhedrin. En mikachin sacheirish ela beretz and masashana ela beretz Yisrael. And the Rambam says why. The Gemara never says why. So the Rambam says why, because there's a halacha that all the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael constitute Klal Yisrael. And the Kviyas Haluach is not done by the Bezdin B'Torah's Bezdin. The Bezdin B'Torah is representing Klal Yisrael. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Kadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, Kadesh Yisrael v'yom ha'zikaron, Kadesh Yisrael v'roshei chodoshim, mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu, B'Kadesh the Jewish people, and we in turn are B'Kadesh the Roshei Chodoshim and the Yomim Tovim. On Shabbos say, Baruch Atah Hashem B'Kadesh HaShabbat, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made Kedusha Shabbos. So Baruch Hakim Hashem HaShvi, V'Kadosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mekadosh all the Shabbosim. But the Yomim Tovim and Rosh Chodesh, that's Mekadosh Yisrael, Hazmanim, the Jewish people are Mekadosh the Luach, when Mekadosh the Zmanim. So the Rambam said that's why he quotes the Gemara in the first parak in Horayos, where the Gemara talks about the institution of Parhalam Davashal Tzibur. Parhalam Davashal Tzibur is like this: if the Bezdin HaGadol has 71 members, they had a unanimous vote that you're permitted to turn on lights on Shabbos. There's no malach involved. You're permitted to turn on lights. So if the chief rabbin says mutter is mutter, so everybody's turning on the lights. So if it turns out that 51% of the tzibur followed the mistaken psak of the Bezdin HaGadol, and they did an averis sheish bakaris, but they did it b'shogeg. So instead of telling each one, instead of telling all the 10 million Jews, each one has to bring a korban chatos, because the mistake was because of the Bezdin HaGadol's mistaken psak. Has to be a unanimous vote. It's so far-fetched. There's going to be a unanimous vote of all 71 members of the Sanhedrin to make a mistake in psak halacha, and the Balabatim are going to listen. Balabatim don't listen to the rabbis when they don't make a mistake. So they should listen when they make a mistake. They're not going to write up how ridiculous it is in the newspapers. I don't know if it ever happened, but on the books there's written there's such a mitzvah. We don't have a principle of the Catholics have such a principle that the Pope is infallible. By us, Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake. Everybody, the Baruch Shalom is infallible, but the Pope, by us, the Bezdin HaGadol can make a mistake unanimously. All 71 voted wrong. So we have on the books there is such a thing. We don't believe in such a story, infallibility of the Gdolim. The Gdolim can make mistakes also. So the din is if the 51% Rav HaTzibah violated an Isa Koris, the Shogeg, because of the mistake from Psak of the Bezdin HaGadol, instead of requiring of each one that he should bring his own korban chatos, we say the Bezdin HaGadol brings a parhalam davashal tzibur, and that's machaper on everybody. So the Gemara says, b'hayro, when you're talking about Bezdin HaGadol making a mistake and the psak and bringing When you're calculating with the Roiv HaTzibur, with the 51% of the Tzibur violated Aver or not, you don't include all the Jews in the whole wide world. You only include the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael. How did they come up with this idea? So the Gemara there in Horius, in the first pair quotes a pasuk in Malachim, that when Shlomo HaMelech built the first Beis Hamikdash, that was a few hundred years after they entered Eretz Yisrael, so there were Jews living all over the place. Not everybody lived near Yerushalayim. So it says there was a big crowd of people, came Kohol Gadol, Melavai Chamos Ad Nachem Mitzrayim, from the most northern point to the most southern point. They came from all over, all the cities, to participate in the simcha of building of the Beis Hamikdash. So it says Kohol, and in Chumash it says V'nelam Dover Me'eni HaKohol. If the tzibur violates an isa because of the mistaken psak of the Beis Hamikdash, the word Kohol appears. So the Gemara says you learn from that pasuk in Malachim that the term Kohol only applies to the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rambam writes this when he writes the mitzvah Kviyas Haluach. That is the Kviyas Haluach. It has to be done in Eretz Yisrael. Why? So he says because the Beis Hamikdash doesn't do it because they're Talmidei Chacham. They do it because they represent the Tzibur. That's Rav Soloveitchik pointed out. There are two parshas in Chumash of Beis Hamikdash. One is in Parshas Behaloischa, I think. It says Esveli Shivim Ish Asher Yadai Tekehem Siknei Ha'om V'Shotrav. Choose 71 Zikanim, 70 with Moshe Rabbeinu, 71. 70 plus Moshe Rabbeinu, 71. So gathered together a bezna of 71 that they're represented. They're the leaders. They represent Klal Yisrael. Then in Parshas Shoftim, it says you have to keep on mishpat. You don't know what the din is, and it's a machlokes and causing friction in the community. You go to the Beis Hamikdash. They're the Supreme Court. They have the highest. They have the highest court of law, and they pass whatever the din is. So the Beis Hamikdash has a double function. It represents Klal Yisrael. Whenever you have to figure out what is Das Reiv HaKohol, yes, the Beis Hamikdash, whatever they say, that's considered Das Reiv HaKohol. So that's what the Rambam writes in the Sefer Mitzvahs. If you can imagine Chas v'Shalom, that's what it says in the Hebrew translation. I don't read Arabic, so I don't know if he really wrote that or just the translator put that. But in the Hebrew translation it says, if you can visualize that there will be a Shoah and all the Jews in Eretz Yisrael will be killed, Chas v'Shalom. They won't have 10 survivors in Eretz Yisrael, but there'll be millions of Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz. So if that should happen, that means HaKadosh Baruch Hu violated his promise. He promised not only there will be survivors, he promised that Klal Yisrael will survive. Klal Yisrael only applies to the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rambam says if you have 10 Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael, and millions of Jews live in Chutz La'aretz, the 10 Jews in Eretz Yisrael, they are Klal Yisrael. The Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz, they are Ki Yechidim. That's the Lashon HaGemara, the end of the first parak in Tainus. All the Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz are Ki Yechidim Domi. Ben Gurion used to say that only the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael are Jewish, the Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz are not Jewish. He didn't believe in Kedushas Yisrael. He didn't believe in Kiddushim. So by him, the only concept of the Jewish people was, in a secular sense, a nation, Klal Yisrael. So he's right. Klal Yisrael only applies to the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael. Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz are not part of Klal Yisrael, but they have Kedushas Yisrael. So that he didn't, by him, that didn't play a role. It didn't exist for him. So that's what the Minchas Chinuch says the pshat is. How come the Chachamim only institute reciting Hallel on a Nesha Eretz Yisrael, on a Nesha B'chutz La'aretz you don't? So he says, Pashat, a Nesha B'chutz La'aretz is a Nes that occurred for Yechidim. You only say Hallel on a Yontif if a Nes occurred for Klal Yisrael. The Klal Yisrael is only the Jews who live in Eretz Yisrael. I don't know why Rab Soloveitchik liked that suggestion. One of the Talmidim of the Inyonei suggested that the mitzvah of Hadlakas HaMenorah was only instituted after the Churban HaBayis. I don't know. He liked it very much. I don't know why. Because the Lashon of the Braise and Megillas Tainus is Shana Cheres Kvam Adam Asom Yamitad Mahalal V'Haidoya. That's why, because it only says Halachic, it doesn't say about the Adlokas HaMenorah. No. The Gemara has a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. The Gemara says Hillel and Shammai were the Rosh Bezdin and the assistant Rosh Bezdin 100 years before the Churban Abayis. Churban Abayis Sheni assumes the year 70. Taisa discussed maybe that's off by year, but that's what we usually assume. Churban Abayis Sheni was the year 70. So 30 years before the Common Era, 100 years before the Churban Abayis, Hillel was the Rosh Sanhedrin and Shammai was the assistant. Then they had yeshivas. So there was Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai existed Bisman Abayis, and after the Churban Abayis. So the Gemara records there was an old machlekes Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel doesn't say it was machlekes Hillel Beis Shammai. The Gemara says there were very few machlekes in between Hillel and Shammai during their lifetime, very few. But the Beis Hillel Beis Shammai, after they passed away, Hillel and Shammai, then there were many disputes between the Beis Shammai and the Beis Hillel. So this is one of them. How do you light the menorah? If you want to light every night a different number of candles, how many do you light? So Beis Hillel say you light 1 on the first night, 2 on the second night, 3 on the third night. Shammai say the reverse. You light 8 on the first night, 7 on the second night, and 6 on the third night, and so on. But the Perches B'Halach and Moise B'Halach. So does that necessarily, the fact that the Gemara quotes a Brisa that there was machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, does that necessarily indicate that the Adlokas HaMenorah mitzvah existed Bisman Bayis Sheni? Not necessarily. The Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel existed Bisman Bayis Sheni and after the Churban Abayis. So it could be like that Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. But I don't know why Rav Soloveitchik got so excited about it. He thought that was correct. If you read the Rambam says Chanukah is made it a yonta b'halvaydo, and you like Neris. So it sounds from the Rambam that they made that takana of lighting Neris right away also. I don't know, but Rav Soloveitchik liked that one. What does it mean? The Ikar mitzvah is Neri should be, so each family should light 1 candle. The first night, 1 candle. The second night, 1 candle. The third night, and that's the whole mitzvah. And then the Sanhedrin light Nelech Alecha V'Yechad. What does that mean, Nelech Alecha V'Yechad? So that's a machlokes Tosfos and the Rambam. So the Rambam, we're so used to our practice, we can't even visualize the Rambam. The Rambam says, instead of lighting 1 candle the first night, 1 candle the second night, 1 candle the third night for the whole family, so you light Nelech Alecha V'Yechad. Let's say a husband and a wife, and we have 9 children. So the first night I would light 11 candles. Second night I'd light 11 candles. The third night I'd light 11 candles. Not that each person lights his own menorah. It's a bracha l'vatala. What? Everybody's yotze with 1 hadloka. The one person is lighting, the balabais who's lighting, should light each night should light 11 candles. Balabais should light candles according to how many people there are. And it's going to be 11 candles the first night, 11 candles the second night. Every night it's going to be 11 candles. And then Moise V'Halach means that what? That the first night you light, the Balabais lights 11 candles. The second night the Balabais lights 22 candles. The third night the Balabais lights 33 candles. A lot of candles there. But only the Balabais is lighting. It doesn't make sense that the others should light. It's one there for the whole Bnei Abayis. Tosfos does not learn like that. Tosfos learns Nelech Alecha V'Yechad means instead of the Balabais lighting 1 candle the first night, 1 candle the second night, 1 candle the third night, so Nelech Alecha V'Yechad is that each member of the family lights his own menorah. We have 11 people in the family, so each one lights his own menorah. And each one lights 1 candle the first night, 1 candle the second night, 1 candle the third night. Nelech Alecha V'Yechad sounds like it includes the men and the women, even the married women. So there's a Ramah. The Ramah has a commentary printed on the bottom of the page in the Tur. That's called the Darkei Moshe. The Ramah, when he wrote his commentary on the Tur, didn't know that Rabbi Yosef Kar had already beat him to it. Rabbi Yosef Kar wrote the Beis Yosef commentary on the Tur. So there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of repeat. So then when the Ramah got a copy of the Beis Yosef, so he abridged the Darkei Moshe. So what we have in our tours is the abridged form, the Darkei Moshe HaKotan. But the original Darkei Moshe, so recently they reprinted the original. The Ramah, I don't know why, when he abridged the Darkei Moshe, said not only did he leave out whatever was the repeat, whatever's already in the Beis Yosef, he left out other things also that don't appear in the Beis Yosef. So sometimes it's really worthwhile to have the original Darkei Moshe Ha'aruch, the longer nusach of the Darkei Moshe. So the Ramah writes in the Darkei Moshe that if a couple is married and the husband lights a menorah, then the wife, one of the two is going to light the menorah first, and the other one's going to light afterwards. The second one is Oivran Bracha Levatala, because Ishta Kegufay, it's treated like one person, and if I light a menorah, then after it goes out, then I light another menorah again, it'll be a Bracha Levatala. So the husband and the wife say brachas, each one's going to light his own menorah, it'll be a Bracha Levatala, there's no mitzvah at all. Married women, you say Ishta Kegufay. So Rab Soloveitchik was not happy about that. He said Ishta Kegufa only appears in the Gemara with respect to the dinim of Psula Edis. Not only am I Pasala Edis to my, I don't have a brother, I have a sister. Not only am I Pasala Edis to my sister or to my sister's children, my nephews and nieces, I'm Pasala Edis to my wife's brothers or sisters, and to my wife's nephews and nieces. Goes Ishta Kegufa, whoever my wife is related to. If my wife would have been Pasal Edis to them, I'm also Pasal. Let's say, if I have my sister married a fellow, and he has a brother who is married, and his wife has a sister, you don't keep on going, Le'olam V'od. Then you're going to be Pasal Edis to everybody in the world. Balki Ishta is the last stop. If you have, my wife has nephews and nieces, and she's pasa, that's nephews and nieces, is a psula edis. So then the husband is pasa to the same people, but you don't say Balki Ishta as a link in the chain to go weiter. Balki Ishta is the last step, the last stop in the train, doesn't go any further. So that's very difficult. The Talmidim of Rav Moshe Feinstein printed in his name that he said, Rav Soloveitchik never told us this, Rav Moshe said, that was the minig in Volozhin, that the married women were like their own menorah. They're not sure, the ones who wrote it over said they're not sure whether Rav Moshe said Rav Chaim Volozhiner instituted that minig or just said in Volozhin Yeshiva. But this he said, in Volozhin Yeshiva, the minig was that the married women would light their own menorah, not like their Ramah. They say that Rav Moshe got married, he wanted his wife to light her own menorah. So she said, he said in Volozhin, that was the minig. So her father was a religious man. So she said, in my family we didn't have the minig. So he didn't force her to, so she didn't follow his suggestion. But Rabbi Soloveitchik thought that that's more correct, that girls should light their own menorah, and even when they're married, they should also light their own. They quote from the Chasam Sofer that since in the days of the Gemara, there used to be madlak mi bachutz, and the pasuk says in the Mishnah, called kvuda bas melech pnima, more bikovadik for women is they should always stay inside the house. So the girls never lit their own menorah. It couldn't be. The girls never went outside of the house, so they never lit menorahs. So what are we lighting menorahs? The women don't have to light their own. What do you mean? The girls never walked outside in the front of the house? It's a little ridiculous. There was Mrs. Chasam Sofer never walked out of the house. She didn't walk to the grocery store. Chasam Sofer went shopping. He didn't let his wife go shopping. How can it be? They say this in the name of the Chasam Sofer as if it's Torah's Lokshen, as if that's it. Women don't like their own menorah because called food of asmal. It's a pella. Anyway, it's not me. In Volozhin, that was the meaning. They would insist on even the married women had to light their own. When you light the menorah in shul, so it says in Shulchan Aruch, that's a minig. A minig is you say a bracha, but no one is yotze with that hadlok, because you're only yotze if you light babeso. Some say that you're only yotze babeso. Let's say you have a husband and wife and 9 children, so 11 people have to light. So one of them has to light babeso. The others can light in the classroom or in Times Square, wherever they want. Everybody was yotze with the hadlok of babeso, and the other one you can light wherever you want. Rabbi Soloveitchik assumed that they were poshut, that that's not correct. All the hadlokas have to be bebeisa. The hadloka is not bebeisa, not mitzurif to me. Yeah. There's a kasha. The Mechaber writes, there's a big machlokes in Rishonim. The Gemara says we recite the bracha when you read the Megillah and when you light Neres Chanukah, even though it's only midrabanan. So how can you say with a straight face Asher Kedishanu, the mitzvah sabat tzivanu, hecham tzivanu? Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't require of us to read the Megillah to light Neres Chanukah. It's only midrabanan. The Gemara says it's legitimate. The Gemara has a whole discussion why it's legitimate. So the Gemara says you say a bracha when you observe a mitzvah midrabanan. What about when you fulfill a minig? So what's an example? So the Gemara has, we have a minig to recite Chatzi Hallel Amesh Chodesh. The Gemara says it's a minig, it's not even a din midrabanan. And in Eretz Yisrael they never had the minig. Rav and Shmuel were learning in Eretz Yisrael, then they both decided to move to Bavel, move back to Bavel, and found yeshivas there. So when Rav came to Bavel, he saw they're saying Chatzi Hallel Amesh Chodesh. He thought they're making a mistake. He never heard that there's such a minig. So the Mechaber writes that you don't say a bracha, because on a minig you don't say a bracha. You only say a bracha on a real din deraisa or din derabbanan. On a minig you don't say a bracha. What else is a mitzvah that's a minig? To light neiris on Erev Yom Kippur. The Mechaber writes that you don't say a bracha, kiddushanim sosa with tzivanu, because it's not true. It's only a minig, and you can't say a bracha on hadlakas on neiris on Erev Yom Kippur. Because the Mishnah in Psachim, there's a parak makom shenoagu. Mishnah records different things that have been nogim. And one of the things is, it says hadlakas aneris and Erev Yom Kippur depends on the minig amakam. So how come over here? The Mechaber says when you light neris and shul, no one's yotze, and there's no chiyuv min haTorah midrabanan, no chiyuv at all. It's a minig. So that's a strong kasha. The Be'er HaGola, I think, raises that kasha. Usually the Be'er HaGola just gives marmakomis. Once in a long while, once every 20 pages, he has a comment. So that's an issue. Yeah, where did this minig come from? When did it start? In the days of the Rishonim, I think. In the days of the Goyim, I don't know if they had it. So the question is, what is it called? The Tikkun Rabbanan came there. I said, what is it patterned after? So the Vilna Gaon writes that it's patterned after the din that appears in Masechah Sofrim. Masechah Sofrim was written by the Gaonim in Eretz Yisrael. The Gaonim in Bavel and Gaonim in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gaonim in Eretz Yisrael, the Magen Avraham says like that. Masechah Sofrim is not part of the Mishnayos. It was written in the days of the Gaonim. A lot of things there we don't follow because the Babli says not so. It was written by the Gaoni Eretz Yisrael, based on the Minhagim in Eretz Yisrael. So it says in Masechah Sofrim, it's quoted in Tosfos and Shulchan Aruch, that on the first 2 nights of Pesach, when you finish davening Ma'ariv in Shul, you say Halal Shalom. So the Vilna Gaon writes in the Be'er HaGra, it's based on that din. So the Ramah writes in Shulchan Aruch, the minig by the Ashkenazim is we don't do that. They only had that recitation of Hallel in Shul the first 2 nights of Pesach for Amei Ha'aretz years ago, who didn't know how to say Hallel. And you're supposed to say Hallel on Pesach night, it's part of the Seder. So they used to say it in Shul, so that people would be Yotze. But Kolon Chacham, Kolon Advan, Kolon is kind of, we know how to read Hebrew, so we know how to say Hallel. So since we're going to say Hallel in the Seder, you don't have to say Hallel in Shul. That's what the Ramah writes. But the Vilna Gaon thinks that that's not correct. And Rabbi Soloveitchik always every year, he would encourage all the Musmachim of the Yeshiva to introduce Hallel in the recitation of Hallel in Shul on the first 2 nights of Pesach, unless you're concerned that it'll open up a whole world war. And Washington Heights, the Yekkes are big sticklers on them in Hagim. So if you start saying Hallel and Shul, they'll walk out in the middle. So here there's there used to be one shul, I think it closed already, the Agudah Shul. So the Agudah Shul is for the non-Yekkes who live in the neighborhood. So a lot of them wanted to say Hallel the first 2 nights of Pesach, but there were some Yekkes who used to come also. So the first night of Pesach, they would finish davening Ma'ariv. They would say Aleinu, they would say Kaddish Yosem after Aleinu, the Yekkes would march out, and after they would march out, then the people who remained behind would say the Hallel. If they would say Hallel when the Yekkes didn't finish saying Aleinu yet, they would walk out, they wouldn't say Aleinu. They would walk out, but it's against them in Hallel. So the Vilna Gaon writes that the minig of Hadlakas Neres Chanukah in Shul, even though no one's yotze, it's only a minig, is based on that din, which we assumes is a din derabanan, that you have to recite Hallel and Shul. What's the comparison? So Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, Rav Soloveitchik every year would say this over the name of his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, that when you have a mitzvah that's for the purpose of Pirsumei Nisa, if you fulfill that mitzvah in the Beis HaKnesses, when you have a tzibur shel tefillah, you'll usually have a bigger group. You'll accomplish more Pirsumei Nisa. Sometimes you daven in a tiny minyan and you're going to have 35 people at your Seder. So sometimes you're going to have more people at Seder than in the shul where you happen to daven. But usually the case will be that it'll be a bigger crowd. So that's what the Vilna Gaon saw over here. Whenever there's a takana, whenever there's a mitzvah midrabanan, that's for the purpose of Pirsumei Nisa. So the minig has it that you do that mitzvah b'tzibur. So Pesach night we recite Hallel in the Seder, l'shem Pirsumei Nisa. So that's why the minig developed. We assume it's not a din. Maybe it is a din, not a din. So the minig developed that you say it in shul before Kaddish Tiskabel. Not that you say Kaddish Tiskabel, Kaddish after Aleinu. No. If you had a minyan of people, they daven, let's say, in a lot of shuls, you daven mincha right before the shkia, then you light Neres Chanukah right after the shkia, then you daven Marav right away. So a lot of times people come a little late on Friday afternoon, so you're going to wait to light the menorah in between mincha and Marav. It may be that they'll finish mincha after the shkia. So then there'll be a malacha, you can't light the Neres. So in Shulchan Aruch, the commentaries quote Rabbi Yaakov Emden recommends that on Friday the chazan should light the menorah before mincha, because it may turn out that there won't be any time before the shkia to light the menorah. So Rav Moshe Soloveitchik said if you light before mincha, you can't say a bracha. You only say a bracha if it's in between mincha and Menorah. That's why here in the Beis Medrash downstairs, Rabbi Cohen always lights every year. He has the chazokah. He used to light in the old Beis Medrash also. He lights here also for many, many years. We were classmates. So it's over 50 years that he lights the menorah here. But we don't say a bracha because we daven mincha at 2:30 and we daven Marav at 6:30. So it's in between. He lights soon after Shkia. So you don't have a tzibur shel tefillah. So Rav Soloveitchik said in the name of his father, he thought on a regular day, most people wait to light menorah after Tzeitzei Kohen. How come in shul we light right away at Shkia? All of a sudden, after shul we follow the Gra. So he said from his father, because you have to have a tzibur, mitzvah yachad. What do you have? You have 10 Jews sitting together. That's called a tzibur. He would always say jokingly, in Yiddish, he would say, 10 Jews reading the Yiddish newspaper, that's not called a tzibur. Called be'asar shchinta sharia. There's a hashras hashchina, because 10 Jews are reading a Yiddish newspaper. Yiddish newspaper always used to attack the religious Jews. So that's not. Called be'asar shchinta. If you have 10 people who are in it start for yachad to say a davish b'kedusha, then there's going to be a hashras hashchina. So Rav Moshe Soloveitchik thought he davened mincha, and they said Kaddish after Ashrei, then they said Kaddish Tiskabel, then they said Kaddish after Aleinu. So you when it started as a tzibur, and you plan to daven Marav right away, so the tzibur didn't disappear yet. The tzibur was still here. And then they're going to daven Marav afterwards, right away. So therefore you have still the tzibur of the tzibur shel tefillah. So that's why you do the hadlakas on there is then. If you're going to wait till later, so there's not going to be a tziruf, you'll daven Marav, so what are you going to light before Marav, after Marav? On Motzei Shabbos, we don't light them between Mincha and Marav, but we daven in the middle of Marav. So the tzibur and the tzaref yachad, when they say Baruch Hu, on Leil Motzei, after V'hu Racham, and then you say the Chatzi Kaddish, then you say Kaddish Tiskabel. So Rav Soloveitchik said where he came from in Europe, the minig was that they lit the menorah in Shul on Motzei Shabbos before Kaddish Tiskabel. We have the minig in most shuls, it says in Shulchan, most shuls, the minig is that you say Chatzi Kaddish after everybody finishes Shmona Esrei of Marav HaMotzei Shabbos, then you say Inyonei and V'yata Kodesh, then you say Kaddish Tiskabel, and after Kaddish Tiskabel, then you light the menorah in Shul. So Leitchik said in the name of his father that more correct would be you should light the menorah when the tzibur is still in mitzvah yachad. So he thought that's why he always thought the minhagim of the kehillah where he came from were more correct. like Chacham Avadia. All of his shuls, he explains why the Minhagei Sfarad are more corrected on the Minhagei Ashkenaz. Rav Soloveitchik thought that you should light the menorah before you say Kaddish Tiskabel, before you say Vihi Noim Aviyat HaKadosh. Then he said he defended the minig that all the shuls have, that you say Kaddish Tiskabel and then you light the menorah right after Kaddish Tiskabel. Kaddish Tiskabel is the end of the Tefillah B'tzibur, so the Tzibur disappeared. So he said they're still going to say Havdalah in Shul. And Shulchan Aruch says there's an inyan of Havdalah B'tzibur. None of the people in Shul are allowed to do malacha until, and big malachas, until you say the Havdalah in Shul. So he said maybe the Tzibur is still Mitzuref because they didn't say Havdalah yet. I don't know, why didn't he just say easily that because they didn't yet say the Kaddish Efto Aleinu? The Ramah writes in Shulchan Aruch that Kaddish Efto Aleinu is not a Kaddish Yosem, that you only say when there's a Yosem. Let's say the Kaddish Efto is Mekoiman. So if there's no Yosem in the yeshiva, our meaning we don't say Kaddish. Sometimes we have guests who don't know our minhagim, so they want to do us a favor. So it takes an extra couple of minutes. So they say Kaddish after Ezra Mekoiman, they do us a favor. Then they say Kaddish after Mizmor Shel Chanukah Sabbath David. That's not our minig. Our minig is you only say that Kaddish if you're an oval. If there's no oval, so it's only Kaddish Yosem. Kaddish after Aleinu, there are more quotes from earlier sources. Even if there's no oval, Kaddish after Aleinu is the Gemar of Tefillah B'tzibur. Ramah says you should keep your tefillin on. The Mechaber says you have to keep your tefillin on in the morning until after Tiskabel. Tiskabel is the end of Tefillah B'tzibur. So you should keep on tefillin during Tefillah B'tzibur. And the Ramah disagrees, says no. The Ramah, Rav Soloveitchik said the Ramah is Lishitos. The Ramah says you should say Kaddish after Aleinu even if there is no Yosem to say it. So the Ramah says therefore Lishitos you should keep your tefillin on in the morning until after the Kaddish after Aleinu, because the Tefillah B'tzibur is not over until you finish Aleinu. Not everybody follows that Ramah. The Bir Ragwa thinks that the Ramah was misquoting the earlier source, and there is no such din. But Rav Soloveitchik always had that practice. Whenever we would daven Ma'ariv, and there was nobody saying Kaddish after Aleinu, he would always say, davening Mincha. There's no oval. He would always say, like the Ramah. He didn't invent it. Like the Ramah says like that. The Kaddish after Aleinu is the Gemara of the Tefillah B'tzibur. So I don't know why Rav Soloveitchik had to come on to say that the Tzibur is still mitzdarf yachad because they're going to say Havdalah later. Because he said they're going to say Kaddish later. I don't know, but that's what he said. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue B'lei Nada tomorrow. It's tomorrow Hilchos Chanukah.